welcome everyone to this exciting roundtable discussion on containers. In today's discussion, sponsored by D2IQ and powered by DZone, we'll take a journey into the realm of containerization, where applications are breaking free from the shackles of traditional infrastructure and design to embrace a new era of agility, scalability, and portability. My name's Jesse. I am happy to be moderating today, Chief Technologist here at DZone, and excited to introduce our panelists. So let's start off with, let's see here, Shai. Wave, Shai. Shai is the CEO of Codename One. Welcome to the show. Dan Cerulli, VP of Product at D2IQ. Thanks for having you. Akanksha Pathak. First of all, thank you for writing the article, Practical Guide to Container Security, in our trend report. Also, Senior Cybersecurity Consultant at Visa. So happy to have you here. And last but certainly not least, we have back Ray Alentini, Solution Architect at Soltech. Thanks. Very exciting panel today. So if you all who are out there really enjoy the show today and you want to see more things like this, you can go to dzone.com/events and share, like, and see more on-demand events just like this one. So as we get into our discussion today, everyone, I want to start with container architecture, patterns, and techniques. When it comes to developing, oh man, this is going to get us in trouble, good software, right? And I don't want to debate on monoliths versus microservices at the moment, but we might get into it later. We talk about generic principles and all that stuff, but we asked the question to the respondents in our trend report to rank prominent container design principles. And I want to hear what you all think about this. So first was providing APIs for process health, readiness, or liveness, logging errors and non-error outputs, and then one concern per container. Now, this matched very closely with our microservices results, but I really want to know, what are your thoughts on these top rankings? And then Dan, we'll start with you. What do you think about these? Do they seem in line with what you noticed?
So they do seem right. I actually like that one concern per container much more than am I a monolith or am I a microservice? So it lets you kind of put that aside. Nice. You don't need to label it, but it kind of tells you, what you should be, the size of chunk you should be deploying. It's what your concern is, literally. And I think that it is really important when doing this well, and you ask them what are the good principles, you do need to be able to assess the health of your application, and to do that will mean that you've got to have things like logging and monitoring, and yes, things like liveness probe available out of the box. If you're doing those things, if you've got, you're not trying to cram too much into a container, and if you're monitoring things properly, you're going to be able to deploy and run a healthy application.
Okay. All right, Shai, do you agree with these top three and with what Dan's saying?
Well, my experience mostly is in the observability layer. So generally, I lots of times feel that we're awash with so many ways to observe everything and so little ways to observe some of the more important things. So a lot of times I see people replicating over and over the things that already work in this field, like the built-in observability capabilities in the kernel, the ability to instrument it properly dynamically. And then again, in the container layer, again in virtualization, again later in observability layers, in the application level, and all of that. And I understand why every layer adds its own level of introspection, because we need it usually when we develop the layer itself. But does the general public actually need to know the container infrastructure's standard to monitor? Usually when I build things as an application developer, I build my observability at the application developer layer where I get the most valuable information. And yeah, DevOps guys do look at the container level to some degree, but generally it's mostly masked from us when we're working with these tools.
Yeah, that's right. And Akanksha, I got to ask, since we're talking about patterns, techniques, first principles, security, where's it fall in all this?
I think I would agree with the kind of survey that we got. And I think Shai just touched upon perfectly. When we talk in security terms, we talk about a thing called observability principle. which means you have to observe not just errors, but also what's not there. What if something goes wrong? How do you find that out, right? So again, coming from security background, I would definitely emphasize that, using API and logging is actually very important, because they both align with the principle. Like, think about it, right? Logging is very good if you want to know not just errors, but also like troubleshooting is definitely one, but also like performance analysis, right? Talks about auditing. What if something goes wrong? You can go back and check it. So observation is actually very important. So no doubt that we have to keep a check on like the responsiveness, like is a pod running, is a container running, and all of that thing. So I agree, but I would also, I just feel that there are a few more principles which are equally important. And again, coming from security background, maybe that is why I'm a little, biased.
Sure.
But I think security design principles, when you add on top of it, it makes, a system which is like really strong and easier for other organization, other vendors, other people to adopt
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So I think
That's awesome.
having like container image optimization, having config as a code, all of these things, you should have it. It's like everything I agree, but a little bit of security touch.
I'm shocked that you would add security in there. No, I'm not. I was kind of expecting it. And Ray, I want to go down a level if I can. This one was interesting to me. It's very rarely when we have a response on a survey drop like this, but we asked what container runtimes and runtime interfaces do they use in dev or production. And as a solution architect, you're down in the weeds, technical stuff, but the use of containerd fell from 93% to 23% over like the last 18 months. Now, yes, part of that is going to be some demographic changes that we had, but still, that's kind of a lot, right? What do you think is causing some of this? Are there new players in market? I mean, what's going on?
Well, I think it's become another abstracted part of the platform, right? And depending on whose runtime environment you're using, right? And what the DevOps organization may have in place already, what you have from a historical perspective, and maybe you were just running Swarm before and you're going to Kubernetes, so that's going to kind of lead you in one direction or another. I think, from a software architecture perspective, as long as is the same principles and the components and the endpoints and everything like that still exists, that may shift, or a lot of that decision shifts way more over to the ops side in terms of what's best suited for them in their environments. Because at the architecture level, the stuff we were talking about earlier, right, there's a lot of abstraction there too. At the end of the day, it's, what's best. Security comes into play here too, right? What is best for that particular environment? And I think is just, I don't know, it's quite the wild, wild west still, but I think there's still a lot of pendulum swinging in terms of figuring out what's going to be the top 1, 2, maybe 3 engines, as the market continues.
Yeah. It'll shift. It reminds me of those. I saw a recent animation of like all the different most popular programming languages over like the last 10 years and how everything shifts, right? It's amazing. To me, Java's always going to be number one, right? But I'm an old guy, so there you go. As we get into the next part, I do want to talk a little bit about microservices and how we split up the work, right? And Dan, we'll start off with you if we can on this one. Again, I know this is near and dear to your heart, but when we're splitting up the percentage of the code and computational work done in the containers, for those using microservices, 55% of the code and computational work was in containers. And then for those not, it was split more of a 39% of the code in containers and 37% of computational work in containers. So what do you think that gap is caused by?
I think it's I think it's how people use terminologies and what they think of. I think there
Okay.
is, if your code is in a container or not. Everybody knows that. Whether your code is a microservice or not is just an opinion and just a label that you decide is this small enough that I'll call it a microservice. Okay. And so I really think that is just reflects on people who use containers are more likely to use that term than anything else. I'm open to, if anyone has a different perspective on this. I'm tired enough of reading about is it Microsoft's services or not, that I've kind of stopped reading those kind of things or paying attention. I don't care about that word anymore, but I'm interested to hear from your other panelists if anyone else feels differently.
Yeah, Shy, let's go to you next. I mean, you know where I am. I'm still a fan of a monolithic Java app. That's I'm still living 20 years ago. But Shy, give me what you think.
So me too. And I actually wrote a DZone article not so long ago about the modular monolith, which I think, lots of times people compare those old monoliths from 20 years ago to modern microservices and saying, oh, these are better. But usually if you'd use modules and things like that, you'd get most of the same benefits with a monolith. The thing is that Dan is correct. The dictionary definition of microservices is, it's smaller monoliths essentially, but that's a bit of problematic if you look at them as self-healing and something that actually provides value. And then when you start getting to Saga pattern and all of the complexities that you need to get to properly scale, and orchestration, which is essentially required for microservices, you can't really do it without orchestrations. Containers is just the beginning there. Then it shifts the balance. And essentially, the thing I believe is that microservices make sense only at a certain scale, but only when you're willing to spend a lot on DevOps, because you essentially take the complexity that you have in monolith development and you don't lose it. You just shift it to a different task force that has different capabilities than you normally would have. And I'm not a huge fan of microservices for most cases. Even Amazon themselves went back from serverless, which is further along the way from microservice, went back to a sort of monolith for a specific use case. And these are guys who have their AWS bill footed already, so not a big problem there. But it's a problem. It's hard to get microservices right. And lots of times I see people building essentially multiple that get wrong when you're building this. And it's
well, keep
there's
that
a lot
in mind.
to talk about.
It's an interesting viewpoint, right? Just because we don't know how to properly use encapsulation in our monolith doesn't mean we need microservices. I get it. And so, if anybody else want to weigh in on this, Ray, there you go. Come on, Ray.
I was going to chime in with that. I've been kind of tired of the topic, and because it looks like it'll never be defined, quite frankly, right? And so, I tend to see the benefits of breaking applications up into units of business functionality, right? That's kind of how, because we get into, is that a nano service? Is that a microservice? I don't care. I want an invoicing service. I want a PO service. That's the level that I'm talking to people at. And so if you look at that, you can see each one of those that have been deployed as monoliths in the past as well, right? And so I think there's benefits to microservices in larger deployments, I says, because you get the density, the containerization and all that kind of thing. But I think that, and I've been talking microservices a long time on DZone, and, everybody still wants to because nobody really knows what they are, and everybody goes just buy them in a bar, every night. So it's really a challenging thing. And I say, what does the business want? What does the business want? Let's build that, and then we'll gradually go from there.
And awesome. If I can jump in, you said in the first one a concern. You put a concern, and it's the same thing, Ray. I think it's the same. Like it's one business concern. And I might add that Amazon team moved from the serverless product to ECS. Right? It's not like they went to let's build a big fat monolith on a VM or a bunch of VMs. They are still very much in the containerized world. They just have chosen a different backend to deploy on.
Yeah, and to your point, to both of y'all's point, is it a nano service, a microservice? Heck, we could call it a macro service. Stop calling it a monolith. We'll call it macro services that run on VMware. But the idea is, and I love the way that you put that, Ray, is to split those things into chunks of business work that accomplish the goal of the application. Let's design our applications to serve the end user and the business, and not just re-architect it for re-architect's sake. I love it. And Akanksha, I want to let you step in here and get in. This is starting to get heated, but come on.
Sure. I mean, the short answer, I feel, I mean, I agree with everybody, but I also agree very strongly with Ray. It depends on the business, in what direction you want to move, and just stay with monolithic or move to microservices. But to the question, like initially that was asked, I feel why people or why organizations who are already into microservices, they're more inclined towards containerization is, I think it has similar intention. If you think about it, right, with the use of containers, when creating microservices, it helps it to make like autonomous, right, to utilize the resources better. So like think about it, when you run microservices on VM, we have to have a separate OS for everything, right? But today, in today's world, the OS's capability, the server's capability is much more than, you don't need to have one particular server for one particular application. It's not required, right? So if you think from business perspective, it is reducing costs. So think about it, right? We are running OS instances, as opposed to a single OS instance, as opposed to one VM, which means you're reducing the licensing cost. So if you think about it, intention is the same, reducing the costs, you can give better results. So why not? So I think the short answer is intention. But again, I think
I like that.
we touched upon it, but modularity, scalability, you're more likely to design application in a modular approach, both from microservices and container standpoint. And containerization always acts as an enabler if you're using a microservice. That's why the tendency, I feel, is there.
That's awesome. I like that. And it goes right into the next part of the discussion, which like the benefits and challenges, the aspects of containerization. We're going to wrap in a little bit of security. So we'll definitely start with you this time. So when we look at all the advantages that you get with containerization in general, we want to understand which of those are most vital, which are the most important, right? Now, by far, and I'm going to quote this because I thought it was funny, magical, effortless deployment. I'm not sure any DevOps person would ever say that exists, but to some of those not actually building it, sometimes it feels magical and effortless, which is a big deal, and that ranked first, followed by number 2, high availability, horizontal elasticity, right? Now, last year it was high availability, still top 3, process isolation, which is now last place this year, and quick spin up of dev environments with, you may be able to say that's magical, but at least it's a faster deployment, right? So when you look at these, first of all, do you agree? Would you add something in there? And if you do, why do you consider these the most important? All right, Akanksha, we'll start with you.
Okay, so if you ask me top 3, I think I would agree with the response, mainly because scalability, deployment, they're definitely important and they're like great benefits. But again, I would like to add that with usage of limited resources and having greater consistency and standardization, that is something that's missed out, but that's also because it has been added, So now it has been a long time when containerized practices are already in picture. So they are more mature. Now, instead of thinking of like, hey, like it can be like a quick spin or like process isolation that was previously considered important, they are still important, but now that's a standard. Like it just happens, So probably this is why it's like not a highlight, but still I think they are major advantages. And regarding magical, effortless deployment, I think this shift could be a response to the need for a faster and more efficient deployment. And I can tell again from a security perspective, the kind of risks that are out there today. Like there's a zero vulnerability coming in, and I know I am pushing my developers like, we have to do it.
Yeah, of course.
Right. So if you have something that makes the deployment faster, obviously like that'll come up as a huge benefit and something that everybody can call out, because that's a requirement in today's world more than it was maybe last year. It's just increasing every day. And then the third one, right, scalability and availability. I believe all the organizations are realizing that it's really important that the application can scale, The application should be available a lot of time. There are a lot of disadvantages if something goes down or if I want to change. So I think it's more about the conditions and the environment that we are living in today that brings up these things as like the top three. But yes, all of that, like having greater consistency around similar container images around, having standardization, I think they are equally important and benefits for
Love
users.
it. Love it. Dan, you agree? Magical, effortless deployments.
I mean, when you put the word magical in your survey, everyone's going to choose that. When you do see a well-functioning, when you have a good platform engineering team who has really removed that concern from the engineering, and they really get to the point that I check in code and I go through my Git process and deployment happens, it really does feel a little bit magical for anyone who has been in the industry long enough to remember what things were like. So I get it. But I had the same, when I was doing the research for this, I had the same impression of Akanksha on some of those things that are now considered less important. It's just that they're taken for granted, and they're still there. It's just that you plan on them being there and you don't appreciate them as much.
We solved that problem last year.
So what comes for free, right? So
yeah, it's just free. It's included, right?
Yeah. So the one, when I look at there are a lot of interesting numbers in this trend report, and this one was interesting because the magical deployment thing, if the numbers are weighted heavily towards the development side. If you look at production side, the deployment percentages are way lower than in dev. And what that tells me is the magical stuff, and I work with a lot of engineering teams, but the magical stuff is, hey, I just need a RabbitMQ real quick. Can you get me one? Bam, there it goes. It's magical and it works on my machine. But is it going through the entire process? Are you building a pipeline from the beginning to the end? To Dan's point, when that's real, and I've been in organizations that's been the case, it's spectacular. But the numbers that are in this trend report show that it's heavily on the left side of the spectrum, if you will, on the dev side, to get people up and running, get up databases and things that they need, probably, I'm guessing, versus taking it all the way through to production, which is that was surprising to me. But that's why the magical thing probably comes from your DZone readers who are heavier on the development side.
Well, listen, pre-tested commit is magical to me, y'all, still, right? When you test my code and then check it and inform me if it works, that's magic. All right, we've got about 6 minutes left, and I want to leave time for the last question. It's always my favorite, and I want to hear from everybody. So I'm actually going to talk about security for just a second. And Shai, I want to start with you. This was fascinating to me because when we asked our security question, because it's top of mind. I mean, Akanksha was saying it, you live in that world every day, but there's stuff all the time, all the way through the process. And we very rarely have a trend report where security is not in there somewhere, right? But we asked respondents on their opinions on whether containers make their apps more secure or not, and how they manage their secrets that containerized code need to run. 51% said containerization made their apps more secure, but it's down from 69% from the previous one. And then that leaves 44% say that it made their apps less secure, which is up from 7%. So there's definitely yeah, I know, Dan, right? So Shai, start us off there. Yeah, okay, go.
The delusion is gone. People understand that when you add another layer, there's another layer of bugs and weaknesses, which is something that they sort of lied to themselves about because it's a magical new technology with no known weaknesses initially. And now they're, okay, yeah, there's weaknesses here too. So it's reality setting in. So I think it's mostly, it makes it a bit less secure than before because, we added another layer. But because that layer is relatively thin, I don't think it's a big risk in that regard. So when you say more or less, these are really big words. But the reality is, if you'd ask people how much more or how much less, you'd see things moving like 3%, 4% in each direction. You would see most people saying it's mostly the same, just the needle moved slightly here or there. But it's an amusing number, nevertheless, because you see the share sort of shifting.
The bubble burst. It was gone. My pipe dream never was realized. Whatever. Yeah, it's awesome.
The reality
Dan,
distortion field evaporates.
there you go. Gone. Out of here. I love it. Thanks, Shai. Dan, what do you want to add?
Nothing. He nailed it. That's perfect. The delusion
All
is
right,
gone.
Ray.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ray. Anything?
So I would say that as we learn more about building images in containers, we realize that we're not building them securely, right? And the number. I mean, the number of organizations I go into, and you fire up a container and it's running as a root user. Like, my goodness, guys. So I think part of it, I like the idea of the additional layer, but I think part of it is we get more familiar with the tech, and we know that. Okay, there are some practices here. There are some standards and practices here that start revealing security holes that are pretty easy to, if you're diligent, pretty easy to close up. I think that's the other thing. It's just understanding the tech even more and understanding what to do and what not to do with it.
Got it. Akanksha, we'll finish with you. What do you think about that?
I think Shai absolutely nailed it. I agree. So number one is definitely that the more we know containers, the more we understand, okay, it's not as secure. Like if you're saying microservices moving from VM to containers, is container more secure? No way. No, VMs are more secure, but then there are more advantages, and that's why we're moving to containers. But there's another factor that I think we all should understand. It's not just us who's growing, right? Even attackers are learning novel ways. The more containers is out in the world, they are also learning and they are coming in so much sophisticated technologies today. And you're like, oh my God. So there's a bigger attack surface today. And there are areas which still we don't have answers to, right? And that is why it becomes a little less secure than it was before. That's a perception. And also we have to understand, like, security is again moving very fast. So there's a shift in the kind of best practices that were there before and today. Like, I remember initially, I remember it was said that, you should store secrets in container images. That was a common practices. Today we know, no, don't do that, right? So that's what I'm trying to say, that security is moving, attackers are moving, everybody's moving ahead. It was as it was before. It is growing, but the challenges are because it is becoming a little bit more complicated than it was.
Right. And I love the way that you put that. I mean, if I combine what y'all just said in just a couple of sentences, the perception more mirrors reality. That reality distortion field is now gone, right? But the reality is also, it is less secure because you have more attack surface, right? There's more entrances, ingress and egress, if you will, non-software term, in your software. That attack, and when attackers have more surface area, they're going to try to poke all the holes that they have available. Exactly. So awesome. I love the way y'all did that. Okay, we have just a little bit of time, and I want to give everybody, just if you can, a quick 1 minute. Give me your ideas here. What is your number one recommendation, or lesson learned? Right, you could do a lesson learned if that works too. And I'll rewind that. I think my screen went black. So if you can, what is your number one recommendation or lesson learned when it comes to facing the challenges of implementing containerization? And let's start with Dan.
I think you want to standardize as much as you can into your platform. You want a platform engineering team that takes decisions away from those developers. So developers are by default going to deploy an application that has as many security questions already answered, is already deployed in a secure way, already has a good monitoring stack in place. Yes, you need to do some application monitoring. Everything's a little bit different, but as much as possible can be built into the platform, will give you the best use of your people's time. You'll have fewer people solving the same problem over and over again, and will lead to applications that are more secure and are observed more correctly. So build as much as you can into the platform.
Awesome. Great recommendation. Ray, why don't you go next?
So, and I've said this a number of times before, it's cultural, right? The tech is almost secondary. It's getting everybody on board, right? Dan's point is awesome. The platform teams, I completely agree with that. But everybody has to be on board here and understand what the organization is trying to accomplish, and just make it happen. Otherwise, it's just the same old DevOps wall of confusion, and nobody gets anywhere.
That's great. Awesome. Shai, and then we'll finish up with Akanksha again.
So I'm with Ray on this. One of the things that bothered me in the survey was that very few people used containers during the development stage. And I want my development environment to simulate the production as much as possible. And that's one of the big things in containers. And the usage of observability is something that you should practice early on, not just when a disaster happens in production. It's something that developers should be deeply involved in and not just sort of communicated through DevOps as part of the process. This whole thing should be a single cohesive team.
Great. All right. Wrap us up, Akanksha.
I would say I agree. 100% I agree with what everyone said. So let's just take a step ahead. I think it's very, very, very important that organizations, the teams, they should invest in proper planning and preparation. Oh my God, I have said that multiple times, but it is really important that you start with the POC, like have a pilot before you scale the containerization, across your SSDLC, your application, whatever, right? But have a POC, see if it is doing the work it's supposed to do, if it is actually giving you the benefits that you wanted, right? Because when you have containerization, there are also new complexities. And there's a shift in the mindset of the processes, how they're working. So it is important that you start with the POC, validate the feasibility, see the benefits are there or not. And it's very simple, like define a goal criteria. Theoretically, it's very easy, right? Define a goal, have a success criteria, choose whatever application you want to start with, and then have like an infrastructure tooling, monitor everything. But theoretically, the steps are great, simple, but when you start doing it, you'll see that, oh my God, there are so many challenges. So start with the POC, invest some time in proper planning, and then go for it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, y'all. That was amazing. What a great panel. What a great discussion. Thanks for lending us your expertise today. For those of you out there watching this, we hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you take some of these lessons learned back into your companies as you're implementing containerization for your applications. If you'd like to see more things like this, go to dzone.com/events, and you can download our latest trend report at dzone.com. Thanks. Y'all have a great day.